There's a moment most people don't talk about, the moment right after they lose money. Not the dramatic crash, not the news headline, not the market chart going red. Just that quiet, hollow feeling sitting in your chest at 2 in the morning, staring at a number on a screen that used to be bigger. That moment is where this story really begins. Because here's what nobody tells you in 2026, when every second person on your feed is showing you their gains, their portfolio screenshots, their passive income setups, the real epidemic isn't volatility. It isn't inflation, it isn't AI disrupting industries, it isn't even bad luck. The real epidemic is something happening inside the human mind, something that was always there, but that the modern world has turned into a perfectly optimized trap. Let's start with something uncomfortable. Most people who lose money aren't stupid. They're not reckless. They're not gamblers by nature. Many of them are careful, thoughtful, even anxious people who read, research, and plan. And yet they still lose. Why? Because the enemy isn't out there. The enemy is the architecture of your own psychology, running on hardware that was built for a world that no longer exists. The human brain evolved to make fast decisions in environments of immediate physical threat. You see a predator, you run. You find foods you eat now, not later. The reward system is wired for the immediate, the tangible, the certain. But money is the opposite of all that. Money is abstract. It lives in the future. Its value shifts with forces you can't see or touch. And every single instinct that kept your ancestors alive is working directly against you the moment you try to build wealth. Take loss aversion. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed decades ago that the pain of losing something is roughly twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the same thing. Well, 2 times. Which means when your portfolio drops 10%, your brain reacts as though something twice as significant happened as when it rose 10%. You feel it more. You act on it more. You make decisions in response to the pain that you would never make in a calm, rational state. And in 2026, with markets moving faster than ever, with news cycles measured in minutes and sentiment shifting, with a single post from someone with 40 million followers, that emotional reaction gets triggered constantly. Dozens of times a day. And every time it fires, it nudges you toward decisions that serve your anxiety rather than your actual interests. Here's one of the most insidious patterns. It's called the disposition effect, and it's quietly destroying more portfolios than any market crash ever could. It works like this. You buy 2 assets. One goes up, one goes down. Your brain, desperate to lock in the good feeling and avoid crystallizing the bad one, sells the winner early and holds the loser long. You take your gains too soon because it feels good to be right. And you hold your losses too long because selling means admitting you were wrong, and that feeling is almost physically unbearable to most people. The result: you systematically cut your best performers and nurse your worst ones. You build a portfolio of regrets. And it gets deeper. There's something called the illusion of control, and the digital age has weaponized it completely. When you have an app on your phone that shows you real-time prices, that lets you execute a trade in 3 seconds, that sends you notifications every time something moves, your brain interprets all of that activity as competence, as agency, as power. But having a button to push is not the same as knowing when to push it. Being able to act is not the same as acting wisely. In fact, research consistently shows that the more frequently people trade, the worse their returns. Not because they're less intelligent, because the feeling of doing something is seductive, and the market is very good at providing the opportunity to do something at exactly the wrong moment. Now let's talk about something that's become even more potent in the last few years. Social proof. Humans are deeply, biologically social animals. We look to others to calibrate our own behavior, especially in uncertain situations. This was adaptive. If everyone in your tribe was running, you ran too and you survived. But in financial markets, Following the crowd is often a reliable path to disaster. In 2025 and into 2026, we saw this play out in real time over and over again. A token goes viral. A stock gets posted everywhere. A narrative spreads at the speed of light. And millions of people, not because they analyzed the fundamentals, not because they did the math, but because it felt like everyone was doing it and not joining felt like being left behind, they bought at the top. And then they watched it fall. And they held because surely it would come back, because everyone else was still talking about it. And it didn't come back. And they learned nothing, because 6 months later a new thing went viral and the whole cycle restarted. The worst part is that this isn't weakness. It's not a character flaw. It's your brain doing exactly what it was designed to do, using social information to make decisions under uncertainty. The problem is that the incentive structures of social media are designed to make everything look like a consensus moment, like a trend, like a movement. When in reality, you're often seeing a carefully manufactured illusion of unanimity. There's another psychological trap that very few people name directly, and it's one of the most damaging of all. It's called narrative bias. And it's the tendency of the human mind to construct stories, to connect dots into causes and effects, to turn random events into meaningful sequences. When the market goes up, we find reasons. When it goes down, we find different reasons. We read the news and we build a story. This policy caused that, this technology disrupted this sector, this leader's decision moved that currency. The story feels solid. It feels logical. It feels like understanding. But most of the time, the story is fabricated after the fact, built backwards from an outcome to manufacture the illusion of explanation. And then we use that story to predict the future. And we bet on it. And the future, which was never obligated to follow anyone's narrative, does something entirely different. In 2026, narrative bias has a new accelerant: AI-generated content. Analysis, predictions, explanations, breakdowns of market movements, all produced at scale, all confident in tone, all optimized for engagement rather than accuracy. The information environment has never been more saturated with compelling stories about why things will happen. And the human mind, which loves a good story more than almost anything, absorbs them and mistakes persuasiveness for truth. Let's go somewhere even more personal now. Because there's a dimension to money psychology that doesn't get discussed enough, and it shapes everything else. It's your relationship with money at the identity level. Most people have deep, largely unconscious beliefs about money that were formed in childhood. Beliefs about whether money is safe or dangerous. Whether having it makes you a good person or a bad one. Whether you deserve it. Whether people like you get to keep it. These beliefs operate below conscious awareness, which means they don't show up in your thinking, they show up in your behavior. You make a great decision, and then something makes you sabotage it. You build savings, and then you find a reason to spend them. You get close to a financial goal, and then you mysteriously pull back. This isn't irrational in the ordinary sense. It's rational behavior serving an emotional logic that you're not consciously aware of. And until you look at that logic directly, until you sit with the question of what you actually believe about money, about yourself, about what you're allowed to have, the same patterns will repeat, regardless of how much financial education you accumulate. Because here's the thing that separates financial psychology from financial literacy. You can know all the right strategies. You can understand compound interest, diversification, dollar cost averaging, the difference between assets and liabilities. You can read every book and still lose money. Because knowledge lives in the prefrontal cortex, the rational planning brain. But decisions under stress, under excitement, under social pressure, under fear, those get hijacked by older, faster, more emotional systems. Systems that don't care about your 5-year plan. Systems that only care about how you feel right now. This is why the most sophisticated investors in the world don't just study markets. They study themselves. They keep journals. They track their emotional states at the time of decisions. They build systems and rules specifically designed to constrain their own impulsive behavior, because they know that their own psychology is the most dangerous variable in the equation. And this is perhaps the most important insight of all. The solution is not to become emotionless. That's not possible and it's not desirable. Emotion is information. Fear can be signal. Excitement can be data. The goal isn't to eliminate the feeling. The goal is to slow down the gap between the feeling and the action. To insert a pause. To build structures that make it hard to act impulsively. To develop the habit of asking before every financial decision, am I doing this because it makes sense or because it feels urgent? Because urgency is almost always manufactured. Real opportunities, the kind that actually build wealth over time, are almost never the ones that require you to decide in the next 10 minutes. The things that feel most urgent, most exciting, most like you'll miss out if you don't act right now.